Ladies and gentlemen, bonjour. Welcome back to a podcast where two guys, you know what they do? You know what they do, James? They talk about triathlon. Talking Triathlon is the name of the show. I still have no fucking idea how to intro this show. Jimbo, it's been a hot minute since we've sat down to discuss the sport of triathlon together. How you going, mate?
Yeah, not too bad. It has been a while, hasn't it? Obviously, we had Joe standing in for me a couple of weeks ago, and then David Tilbury Davis standing in for you a couple of weeks ago. I thought maybe this week it would be the Joe and David Tilbury Davis show. We'd bring
we
them
should,
together, and both of us could have a week off.
we should. I actually, we should have discussed that before because that would have been perfect. That would have been a phenomenal thing. You are obviously in the UK. I am coming to you live from Paris, France. I'm sitting in an apartment somewhere in France, in Paris. It's a grey, gloomy day. It was raining when I got here. It was about 20 degrees colder than what it was in Nice. But yes, for Paris is one of my favorite cities on the planet, but people don't really particularly care about Paris. They are here, James Bale, to hear us talk about all of the action from Nice. But before we get to that, mate, what's been happening in your world?
What's happening in my world? Well, I'm almost a runner again, mate. I
Look
I
out.
can I can almost run properly. Almost. I've got this sort of lingering discomfort, but the comeback is on now, and I'm finally starting to move again. I've got a couple of kilograms to shift after the 3 months of inactivity and injury, but other than that, onwards we go. How's your health and fitness holding up after all this travel slash holiday that you've been on?
Not much of a holiday, to be
I'm
honest, but
calling it a holiday, mate. I can't imagine.
do you know, it's so funny how many people have been like, so when are you back from holiday? I'm like, I'm not on
Yeah.
holiday, guys. I've been working like a dog the whole time. I think Nice race week was chaos. Like it always is. And I think the thing I realized, I don't know how this show's going to go. We're going to jump around all over the place, but Nice is so much bigger than Kona is. Like
Yeah, it's massive. Yeah, it's
it's
a huge
it's
city.
it's massive. I don't think even looking at it on a map when I was trying to book accommodation, you sort of look at the course, your brain can't comprehend how big Nice is. And if you think of Kona, Kona is an actual little tiny country town. Nice is a city. So in Kona, at least, a lot of the commitments you got to go to are all pretty concentrated. Whereas Nice, you're like running from one place to another place to another place to another. It was absolute chaos. And then race day was obviously race day. But I think I've got like you can hear my voice is probably a little bit deeper. I think that's from all the screaming that I did on Sunday and then at the beer mile that Joe did on Monday. But I'm probably a little bit worn out. I feel like I'm just a little bit, yeah, not 100% fit, not healthy, but yeah, keen to get stuck back in. I'm on the road for just over another week, and then back home for another couple of days before I jump on a plane and head to the US for Super League in Malibu. So it's that busy time of year. I knew that it was going to be like that, but it's a good problem to have when you get to travel around for triathlon. Uh, but as we sort of said, Jimbo, this podcast is talking triathlon. When we talk about triathlon, if you like it and you want to hear us talk even more about triathlon, head to patreon.com/talking triathlon, where we record a bonus monthly show. We're going to do that immediately after this week's show. I think we're going to get a little bit more spicy about our thoughts around all the action from Nice. And I'll tell some of the rumors and the gossip that I heard on the ground. But again, guys, it's literally, we use the money to put this on YouTube, put the reels up that people seem to be liking. So if you enjoy the show, you want to support us, head to patreon.com/talking triathlon. Jimbo, Ironman World Championships in Nice. We have a new Ironman World Champion. How do you
We
want to do
do
this?
indeed, do we not?
We do. Sam Laidlaw absolutely destroyed the field. He has proved a lot of his doubters, including myself, absolutely uncategorically incorrect in what I think is possibly one of the most dominating performances I've ever seen in the history of the sport. Unbelievable how he just put everybody to the sword out on that course. I didn't even consider him a factor for the podium, to be honest. And I understand that is my error, but I just couldn't see with the bike power and the run power we had in that race. I just did not see how he was going to do it. And he proved me, as is often the case, extremely wrong. But again, I was on the ground. I've watched the race live, and I spent a lot of the race day on a moped driving around the course or trying to get to different points of the course. So I probably don't have as much knowledge of how the actual race unfolded compared to yourself. So how do we want to talk about the race itself? Do you want to talk a bit about my experience in Nice? I was at the pro briefing, for example. I can talk about that stuff. How do you think we should attack this, Jimbo?
Well, I want to echo your thoughts initially. Like he was nowhere near my predictions. because, like you say, the strength and depth of the bike power and the run power we had in that field, but also coming off the back of the injuries he's had, the
Mm,
illnesses that he said he's had.
mm,
You know, it's very surprising to me that he put in a performance that dominant, with what seemed to be the inability of an incredibly strong pack of bikers. First of all, in Clément Mignon to stay with him. Secondly, with a chase pack to catch him. It was remarkable, and he looked like he was operating on another level to everyone else.
yeah. Yeah.
Now, I woke up halfway through the swim. So I say I watched the race start to finish. I missed the very start of the swim. But I don't think I missed much on that one. I saw them coming out of the water together. And then I saw them set off on the bike, and I saw that sort of what transpired after that. I think before we get into the race, blow by blow, we should be interesting to start with your experience of the pro briefing and what sort of took place there.
Yeah. Okay. We can go from there. So I was at the pro briefing. I actually got told I had to go with Joe to make sure that he paid attention. So he knew where the course was and, and things like that. But it's the first time I've been to a pro briefing, particularly at a world championship event. And I think following on from what happened in Leyte with Lionel Sanders, everybody was curious about this centerline rule. I know that Ironman put out a change to the rules in the lead up to this event, specifically addressing the centerline rule. And mate, what a fucking shambles this pro briefing was. Like, I mean, they just went through the usual rigmarole. These are the rules. And as soon as we got to this centerline thing, it started to kick off. I think it was the wording was something like, if you cross the center line, you may be issued a no serve, a penalty, or a disqualification or something. And almost instantly, Jan Frodeno was like, "Are we drawing straws? Like, how do we decide who gets what? What's the process?" And they were very quick to shut down conversation at that point. And it was when they sort of wrapped up the main part of the pro briefing. It was so obviously staged. Like, so you had Andrew Messick jump up at the back of the room, be like, "I have a question. I'd like you to explain to me how the centerline ruling works," because you can tell that they obviously knew this was coming. And if you want to talk about a fumble at the try line or the goal line, this was Ironman doing it, because I would assume, right, if you're an organization like Ironman going into your world championships, you've just had this very controversial penalty or disqualification of one of the highest profile athletes in the sport. You're coming to your biggest race of the year for the men. You're going to probably round table and go, "So what are the things we're likely to get asked? Like, what are people going to want to know? Let's
have this answer dialed in."
Yeah, let's work out all the possibilities of things. Fucking hell. It was so weird to hear how they tried to answer it, because they were saying it's straightforward. If there's no centerline, imagine there is one, you can't cross it. But you can only cross it if it's for safety or to like avoid a crash or something like that. So then people said, okay, well, safe. It was actually Rudy von Berg, I think, who was the one bringing it up. He said, so from a safety point of view, if I'm going around a hairpin, it's safer for me to cross the center line, cut the.
Yeah.
He said,
when you say safety, define safety.
Yeah.
Is it safety in terms of taking a racing line down a road, or safety in terms of avoiding something that's in the road? I mean, come on, do better.
And they said, no, yep, we want you guys to race. You know, we want you to use as much of the lane as you can. Like, it was very confusing, because he was basically saying, yeah, no, we want you to take race lines. We want, to world championships. We want you to race. And then Rudy's like, yeah, but again, can we cross the center line? They're like, no, you can only use the right hand lane.
So there's inbuilt contradiction there.
So that was the first contradiction. And then one of the questions Joe Skipper asked was, if we're not allowed to cross the center line and we're going down this technical descent and motorbikes can't cross the center line because it's open to traffic, where do the motorbikes sit? Because we can't have the motorbikes then amongst the athletes, because then it provides an unfair, like the other reason that we've sort of gotten rid of motorbikes is to stop people drafting off motorbikes. They also couldn't really answer that question. And then they got asked how many motorbikes are going to be on course. They couldn't answer. They refused to answer that question, and then couldn't answer that question. And then what Rudy did is he said, that footage of me overtaking Alistair Brownlee on the descent in 2019, is that allowed? And then Andrew Messick started answering. Andrew said, no, that is fine, because Alistair Brownlee pushed across and you had to push across to pass him. And it was just this, nobody knew, everybody was just like shaking their heads going. And the question that they were talking about as well was around serving penalties. And they said that if you get issued a penalty, the process, because again, Lionel said that he didn't understand the appeals process. You have to serve the penalty, come to the finish line within 15 minutes. You can appeal it. And if it's appealed, it's fine, but they don't deduct the time. And the question that I wanted to ask, because it wasn't clear, was if you choose not to serve a penalty, because they seem to have indicated if you don't serve a penalty, it's an automatic disqualification. So what I wanted to know was if you don't serve a penalty and appeal the penalty, are you still disqualified even if the actual penalty is overturned for not serving the penalty? And
so if they give you a penalty,
yes,
you serve it,
yes,
get to the finish line,
yes,
appeal it,
yes,
it can be appealed, but they won't change the time.
correct.
So you've still had essentially you've had the implications of the penalty.
Yes. And when people ask this question, they're like, but that doesn't make any sense, because if
That
I've
makes no
served
sense.
and this is I'm going to make my point now. They were talking about, yeah, but there's other reasons, like you might have a disqualification, or what was the thing they said? You might be in the wrong age group, or you might something like that. And it was like, no, you're talking about age group rules. And that's when I think I asked Joe about it a few weeks ago, and I really think I've come to realize is they don't seem to have a different set of rules for professional athletes. Because look, for the age groupers, I am 100% in agreement. Do not cross the center line at any point. This course is extremely technical, extremely narrow. There's points where there's literally a barricade that's 50 centimeters high that if you go over, you drop hundreds of meters. I'm all for it. The professionals should have a separate set of rules, and I don't think Ironman have that. And that's a huge problem to me, because we walked out of that pro briefing saying this is meant to be professional sport and we're more confused. They didn't seem to know what the answers were.
I mean, they firstly, they should have had that answer dialed in. That answer should have been what they've been working on. You know, from a briefing perspective, that should have been roll out. This is the answer. These are the, even if they're not what the pros want to hear, a definitive yes or no, black and white type thing. All right, you're not allowed to cross the center line. If you do, you will be disqualified. Well, you know, what if I want to take the racing line? You can't. As opposed to, well, yeah, maybe.
Yeah, maybe.
Like, you know,
if it's
you
a
can kind of do
subjective,
it.
it's a subjective, and if you do, you might get a penalty, you might not get a penalty, you might get disqualified. Like, it was just, again.
Yeah, I mean, what they're leaving themselves is the ability to do what they want.
Yeah, it's too much. It's too arbitrary. There's too much subjectiveness in that. And again, like I feel like you're right. They did basically say don't cross the center line. Don't cross the center line except this, and this, which is completely vague and undefinable. And I don't think there was a single penalty for crossing the center line. I'm positive people were crossing the center line. I think if you watch the broadcast, there are people crossing the center line. I don't think that anybody should be penalized for it, because I think it's a stupid, absolutely ridiculous rule.
It is on the pro side, 100%. Yeah. And it gives them a power that they shouldn't have, which is to be able to single out certain athletes, which they may or may not do. I'm not saying they would single out certain athletes, but if someone were to get a penalty for crossing the center line, then they are in a position to be able to say, I've been singled out because of this, this, and this, as opposed to saying there's a unilateral rule that's applied to everybody. Yeah. You're giving athletes the ability to say, hang on a second, you've penalized me, but what about him? What about her? Why haven't they been penalized? And then that leads down a road of saying, well, have you got favorites? Or have you got a commercial reason for not penalizing that person, but you've got a commercial, it doesn't worry you penalizing me? You put yourself in a position where you can't defend your own position.
Yeah.
And that is never good.
Yeah, I completely agree with that, because they basically said it just comes to the discretion of the referee. And that's, again, look, I'm all for giving officials discretion. But yeah, look, this was just one thing. I don't want to keep talking about the centerline rule for too long, because it ultimately didn't come into effect. But what is interesting is when you go to the penalties, and we'll get to this, Braden Curry was issued a littering penalty, which I think was bullshit, because he literally hesitated throwing his bottle so he didn't hit somebody, threw it, and he was slightly outside the littering zone at an aid station. And they issued him a 5 minute penalty.
Is that how it transpired? Because it wasn't shown on TV.
Yeah, so that's what happened. And he again, as you would be, you think you're not there to, you're not just there to complete, you're there to try to win the thing. He got quite dejected, dropped effort. Ultimately, he said on his video that he got told, because there was I think there was a penalty box at 80K or 90K, and there was one at the transition. And he must have come in and they were telling him, don't serve the penalty, which again goes to my point. It was so unclear because I was under the impression that if you opt not to serve a penalty, it's an automatic disqualification. So that's what I mean. Like there was probably people, because I think Jan Frodeno got a penalty as well at one point because his bottle fell out. Like again, it's the same thing that happened in Kona last year to Leon Chevalier. Like these rules that aren't, it's not professional rules, right? I understand for age groupers, you don't want to have people have, but they need to have like an actual set of rules for the pros to make it clear so that we avoid these. I'm so sick of talking about these shit decisions.
Yeah.
Lately.
Yeah. I mean, and the littering zones are there as in my opinion, the way I see it, they're there as an ideal. That's where you drop your litter.
Yeah.
If I throw a bottle and it rolls out of the littering zone as I'm going past as a professional at flat out pace, I would think that person would just be like, rather than think, well, penalty because it rolled out. I think they are the place where you try and drop your litter. Obviously, any attempt to drop litter outside of that zone would be a penalty. But if you're trying to drop your litter in that zone and it happens to not quite make it, come on. We're talking about professional racing here.
Do they have that in cycling? It's just a free for all, right? Do whatever you want.
No, in cycling they have. It's kind of it's more of a free for all, but there is a kind of an unwritten "you don't drop your litter" type thing.
Just like the spare empty bottle, because I know that when I've been at events, I actually got a bunch of water bottles or bidons when I was at the Tour of Norway a few years ago, because the pros like throw the bottles to the
they give them to
stuff.
the fans. They give if you've got a bottle to get rid of, they give it to the kids if they can.
Yeah, it's cool. But yeah, that was the pro briefing was quite chaotic, to be honest. And like I said, I feel like a lot of people probably had more questions left than they had answered at the end of it. But that was a few days before the race. I went to the press conference because Joe was there, so you had best of the best, some incredible athletes. And then it was race day, really. And we saw the race sort of unfold. Now, I was at the swim start. Again, I'll tell you, I was at the swim start. I saw them swim to the turnaround once they all came around those buoys that were close to the water. I then jumped on a moped and we rode up to Gordon, which is halfway up that first really big climb. So that
were you on the back of the moped or were you piloting?
I was on the back of the moped.
Who was piloting your moped?
So Joe's mate Lee, who was the guy with the spraying him with water at sub 7, Lee was on the front of the moped. So we were at Gordon when the athletes came past there, and then we dropped down, went around. Again, because of all the road closures and stuff, it was quite difficult. But we then ended up about halfway down the descent back into town. Then from there onto the run course and watched them run. So that was sort of my day. But let's talk about the race, mate.
Yeah. So, I mean, watching it transpire as a spectator, I think the course is fantastic. I love it. I love that bike course. I love what it does to a traditional triathlon field. You've got incredible bikers on there who are used to riding flat out time trials. Watching that bike field decimate and pull apart as it got onto the bike course was amazing. If you hadn't had Sam Laidlaw at the front, it would have been a spectacular race. Do you know what I mean? Yeah. It was just having him putting time.
That's almost every race we've watched in recent times, though, isn't it? Is if like
it is, yeah.
You take out that one outlier who's significantly faster than everybody else, you actually have really close racing. It's just that every event we seem to have has this one person that has this exceptional performance, and it sort of is just like, can we just?
Yeah, because I mean, get rid of Sam Laidlaw and Patrick Lang's chasing Magnus Ditlev for the win.
And passing him last lap.
Yeah, and it's looking remarkable. But before we get to that, the bike course was amazing. I loved it. I love watching the climbs. I love watching the descents. It's an interesting course because they have to push up to that sort of plateau bit on the top.
Yep.
Then those power bikers who are the TT specialists get a chance to open up a little bit along that top, and then it comes down to how well you can descend. I really enjoyed watching Cam Worth do his thing. Mate. He was.
I just to interject, because where I was on the descent. Again, I'm not sure how, but there was about halfway down the descent. You come down around a blind corner and the road splits in two, and you sort of do a chicane to go to the right. And we were there, watch Sam come down. Magnus looked really stiff, actually. Like I think the rumors that he can't descend that well might have actually been true, because he didn't look as comfortable as some of the others. And then fucking Cam Worth comes down error bars, mate. Fucking error bars. He was going so fast that the motorbike chasing him was on such an angle that it's like the foothold scraped through the tire on the road. You hear this god awful noise and you thought it was a crash. And it was just because this motorbike was going so fast, trying to keep up with Cam Worth going down this descent. It was one of the sexiest things I've ever seen in triathlon in my entire life, was Cam Worth taking this corner on the aero bars. No other athlete, and I saw most of them not one of them was on the aero bars like Cam Worth was. He was chef's kiss.
Yeah, watching that man ride that bike is a joyous thing to behold. But unfortunately, for the interest of the race, for the sort of what's going to happen, the jeopardy, let's say,
Yep,
it was getting less and less interesting as to who was going to win this race, because Sam was just putting time into people on the bike, and on the run, he was doing enough to stay well and truly in front, despite the best efforts of the commentators to try and be like, oh, Patrick Lang might catch him. You never know. And it was just like, no, it's not going to happen. He's too far ahead at this point. And what was, I love the race. I really did. I love the course. But some people were dropping down the field, and I was just like, I didn't understand it. I didn't get what was happening. I messaged you a couple of times, was trying not to message you too much because I knew you were on the move. But I said, like, what's happening with Joe, for example, because he was just going backwards. He had a poor swim, but then he just started going backwards on the bike, and he made up a bit of time, but then he would drop back again. And then on the run, he looked, whatever, I saw a video of him, he looked like he was running strong, but then he was just falling down the field. Explain Joe, mate.
We'll go to the Joe. Okay. So I obviously was in NT for the first week with Joe, trained with him every day, got my ass fucking whooped by Joe Skipper constantly. Every single session, to the point where I was like, mate, I can't keep doing it. You're murdering me. Like, you're murdering me. And it's not like, I don't think he's just like, oh, we're just going to go out and do an easier ride today. I'm like, okay. And then it's just like straight on like 300 watts. And I'm like, fucking hell. And I'm just dying at hold. And obviously I'm not a terrible bike handler, but
we got to say that beating Tim Ford is not a metric for winning the world championships,
correct.
Is it?
But I mean, I said it, and I genuinely thought the pool would be probably the place that I'd be able to at least, be fine with Joe. He was swimming so well. He was biking so, watching him descend. He put 15 minutes into me in that descent. 15 minutes into that descent. That's how much faster he was descending than me. And I'm not a bad descender. Everything the signs were looking good. Like, genuinely not trying to be biased. Objectively, as a viewer of the sport, I thought that Joe was going to go exceptionally well in this race. The swim, I think he just had a bad swim. To be honest, we've discussed it a lot. Just a bad swim. The bike, we think we know what happened, but it's not my place to say. I'm not gonna come at it. It's for Joe to. There's things being checked, but we think it was probably some mechanical issues with the bike, not the bike, the equipment. And then on the run, I think when you get off the bike so far behind, and you're seeing this happening, it's hard to because when we saw Joe on the descent, and he's like, he basically was like, what's the point? And we were saying to him, you can still maybe get a top 10, mate. Like, lots can happen. Stay positive, stay positive. And on the run, we were saying, mate, you're second fastest on course. Like, just doing what we could to keep his mind positive. And then he said he just got to halfway through the run and just started to feel really sick. Spent like 25 minutes sitting down, basically trying to recover. And we thought he was done, so much so that me and Lee were starting to walk down the far end of the course to find him. And Joe had so many family and friends on course. So we had this group chat, and they're like, no, he's on the move. And when we saw Joe come back the third lap come back, he suddenly looked like Joe again. He was positive. He was looking, he's like, no, I'm feeling good again. And he's like, I'm finishing this race. I'm finishing this fucking race. What he yelled at me. And I just think it's, he was very emotional at finish. Joe's had some other stuff going on that is also not my place to say. But, in discussions, I'm sure I'll say this on the podcast this week, but I think he really just wanted to honor the course, honor the athletes. He said to me, and it's true, it's very easy to win when you're feeling good, but it's harder to finish when you're feeling shit. And I was extremely proud of Joe out there not to give up. I think he's such a warrior, and I know how much he's put into this race and how difficult it must be to not have that performance. But I love the fact that I really think we're going to see Joe super motivated, and he's going to use this. And I mean, look, to be honest, I'm not sure in hindsight if the course is as suited to him as I thought it was. I thought it was because Joe is such a strength-based athlete, but Joe's also a heavier guy, and those climbs take up a big part of the course. So you saw a lot, I think, of the bigger guys. I mean, Sam's similar size to Joe, I suppose, but Sam was just on one. But yeah, just one of those days. Sport has it.
Yeah, I mean, it's you're with the course and the heavier guy comment. You're echoing what David said last week, which is essentially that he felt that Joe was gonna have to burn a few too many matches to get to make up that deficit on the swim, going up that climb, and then not quite have it on the run. I think there was more to it than that.
There definitely
in terms of, like, it wasn't simply Joe on his best day isn't suited to this course, if you know what I mean.
Yeah.
It wasn't Joe's best day. It wasn't the day that,
let's just say Joe's power was the best that, like, was better than we expected. Like, when we've analyzed the power post race, the power was better than we expected it to be. I rode the course with Joe when he wanted to do a test run of that climb, and he wanted to hold 255 watts going up the climb to see that was what he was aiming to do it at, to see what time he would do if he went up. And he was using Cam Worth's time when he won, or when he did Nice, I think 2 years ago, as a gauge. And I think Joe went up in like 49.30 for the climb, which he said was about 90 to 60 seconds off where Cam was. So his plan was very much, he knows he's going to lose time on the climb, but he wants to minimize that without burning matches. It's interesting talking about the plateau as well, because again, I've ridden literally the entire course I covered, not in one go, but, over the duration of time I was there. Even the plateaus, like, there's no easy. The first 10K and last 10K is easy. The rest of it is either up or down, and no up or no down is just a straight long grind. It is technical and windy, and the road surface is fucking shithouse. Like, it is a horribly brutal, wonderful course. But yeah, I don't know where I was going with that. I just wanted to.
No, it sounds like riding in Devon, to be honest. There's no flat and a crap road surface.
Do you know?
I'm used to that.
So bad that when we were going down that big, the last descent the first day, so I did the descent twice. Is that right? Yeah, I did it twice. The first time they hadn't gone out and they hadn't marked all the obstacles, so I'm riding down going, Jesus Christ, there's fucking manhole covers and cracks in the road and these things, and then they've obviously dug a trench down part of it, so there's this black line that's kind of got a lip on it, and then it was, I remember going down, it was me, Joe, and Matt Hansen, the three of us. And I was actually able to keep up with Matt for a fair bit of it. But 2 days later or 3 days later, when I did it again, they'd gone and marked every obstacle. It was like a fucking patchwork quilt made of oranges. The entire road, just this bit sprayed, this thing obstacle, this thing marked. It really was. It was a rough road. And again, for me, this is the first time I've come to France for training. I've never ridden a bike in France before this week. I spent 2 weeks in Girona last year, had the best time on my bike of my life. I think Girona was my favorite place to ride. That has not changed. I fucking hated riding a bike in Nice. Like, I really did not enjoy the experience of riding. Like, Nice is huge, mate. And the first hour of every ride, you're stuck in traffic. Even on the climbs and stuff, there's so many. Like, the French drivers are very nice. They leave you alone. There's just so many of them.
Really?
Yeah.
French drivers are very nice. French drivers.
I don't know.
Very nice.
They seem nice to us. I didn't get any.
Well,
I'm used to Australia, mate. So it's
all right. Well, I mean, it's
threshold.
not the experience I have when I'm in Lyon or the Collonges Mont d'Or or anything like that. It's my experience of French drivers is very, very different.
There was one that that's weird. I just had a coffee. It tasted a bit salty. There was one guy that swerved into Joe, or looked like he was trying to take Joe out. But we got to the point where it was so frustrating riding a bike that we just drove out to grass. And would climb up the main climb a different way and get to that same roundabout in Gordon, and then go up the rest of it, because it was too difficult getting to and from the accommodation. But yeah, the course was I think it's the best sort of course for a world championship. I want to see those sort of courses. I mean, I've been very vocal about this, right, for a long time, that I'm super pro them moving the world championships, and this is the exact sort of race I would like to see. Having said that, the run's fucking terrible. What a terrible run course. Even so much so, right, that how that Promenade d'Anglaise is one side was the run course, one side was the bike course, which meant that you couldn't even line the run course with spectators either side. Why? I just feel like we discussed it a lot that if you go the other way down the Promenade d'Anglaise towards Monaco, there's a hill straight away. Like there was, or you could go all the way to Antibes and back. Like I think they could have done something with the run course rather than just this flat 4-lap.
They were trying to make it city centre to get as many people there as possible, I
It wasn't even
assume.
city centre. I still we were discuss. I've discussed this with Joe and others a lot. I don't know how familiar you are with Nice, but the expo and I guess the race center was probably 500 meters inland in this. There's like this grassy strip that sort of splits Nice in half, and the expo was there. And we were saying, how cool would it be to? And again, I understand road closures and things, but imagine if you had a run that was one lap, but you keep almost like it's like an octopus. So the athletes keep going out and then coming back in a different way, so that you always keep coming back to this central hub where all the spectators, all the fans can be, so that you see the athletes like 16 times or something. Like, and again, Nice has this beautiful old town that's hilly. It's got the cobbles. I really feel like do one lap of the Promenade d'Anglaise. That can kind of be like a league drive or whatever you got in Kona, but they should have utilized more of the there, because Nice is hilly as fuck, mate. Like you have this incredibly brutal bike course and then suddenly a pancake flat run course where I think it was Bob Babbitt said the ramp doubles the elevation on the run course going to the finish line. Like, and legitimately, it's just so flat. But
Tim's Octopus, that's what we'll call it.
I like it. The Tim's Octocourse. There we go.
Tim's Octocourse. Yeah, I mean, I love the course. I love the race. As a spectator, it's difficult to really get an impression of the run. All you ever see on the TV is people running, and you're just like, oh, it looks all right.
I remember the point I was trying to make that I went on a really, really long-winded way of getting. I was going to say that because you were talking about it being fairly obvious that Sam was going to win. Genuinely being there and watching, I actually thought that Patrick was going to catch him. Like,
did you?
Because I wasn't keeping times. It was just visual. And I mean, I know I was wrong because we saw Patrick running down Magnus, and I thought the second time they came past it, Patrick had closed the gap, but he actually had Magnus had put in a bit of a dig. So it's not as easy to tell when you're in person. Like you can't. The gaps are, I guess, harder to see than objectively looking at a clock. But
so was it more exciting in person then?
It wasn't exciting the first 2 laps because it just seemed like Sam was so far ahead. But then watching Sam come and then Magnus and Patrick was right behind him. And just the way Patrick, maybe it's probably because comparing Magnus, who's this big, lopey, fucking Sasquatch running guy, compared to Patrick, who just fucking looks like the Terminator. I think that maybe comparing them and then looking, I thought it looked like Pat was running so fast that he was going to run Sam down. And it wasn't until
his run form is incredible.
The guy, like, honestly, just insanity. But again, credit to Magnus, because I thought when he ran past Magnus, like he was standing still, Magnus might drop. Right. I thought Rudy would catch Magnus, to be honest. So Magnus
did well to dig in on that one.
But from
where I was sitting, it was very obvious Patrick wasn't going to catch him. All you had to do was some very simple math, in terms of the pace that Patrick was running and the gap between him and Sam. And it was like, unless Sam fucking capitulates, which at no point in that race did it look like he was going to do. Yeah. Looked like he was breathing through his nose, to be honest.
Yeah. Genuinely though, like I think that's the thing. It wasn't until I pulled out the tracker when they were on the last lap, and then I went, "Oh, there's no way. There's no way," because he was running like 25 seconds per kilometer faster. But when there was literally like 8 kilometers left, and he was nearly 4 minutes down, it's like the math doesn't add up. So at that point, to be honest, that's when we went and started looking for Joe, because it was just like it's Sam's got it. Like it's not even close, and it wasn't. Yeah, indeed. 4 minutes, 4 minutes, mate. So that was my race experience. I will also say that Joe did the beer mile on the Monday, and fuck me if there was not 200 people at this beer mile.
Did you do the beer mile?
I did not. I will not ever. No, thank you. I do not like beer miles. I've done one once. It was horrible, but genuinely blown away by how many people showed up to that beer mile. It was incredible. So it was good to meet. And again, lots of podcast listeners also came up to me in Nice and said hi and said they enjoy the podcast.
Probably looking for me, weren't they?
There was lots of questions about where you were, and I kept saying he's just a coward. He just doesn't like to show up on the big days. But yeah, that was my Nice experience. Had a great time. I also want to shout out my other guy that was out there, Mike Phillips, the Kiwi athlete, another guy that we think was going to do really, really well. And Mike got a bit crook. We're not, again, 100% sure exactly what happened, but ended up not finishing the race. So for me, it was a pretty grim day out there. And then, yeah.
So let's talk. We both talked about our own experiences of the race. Mine was, you get a lot more, as always, you get a lot more information when you're watching something on a TV screen than you
Yep.
do when you're on the race course. I would always prefer to be by the side of the race course. You get a bit more buzz, you get a bit more atmosphere, you get a bit like, and like you say, you were caught up in whether the Patrick was going to catch Sam's story,
Yep.
whereas those of us at home were just like, well, this is over.
Mm.
What do you think of Sam Laidlaw as a winner then, Mr. Ford?
As I sort of touched on at the start, I think I cannot see anybody beating him if he is that dominant. He was. We're not talking about a close race here. We are talking about a more dominant performance than I think we even saw Jan Frodeno do in 2019. Not because of Jan, obviously he's incredible, but because of how that course was. He showed no weakness, man. Like he swam front pack. He rode off the front. We had that group of Bradley Weiss, Rudy von Berg, and Magnus fucking Ditlev trying to chase him down and losing time to him. And then he ran the sixth fastest marathon of the day to win by 4 minutes. I don't even think the Norwegians would have been able to beat him on that day.
No.
I don't.
Everybody can have an off day. So counting one athlete as a metric or a yardstick by which to judge somebody is a dangerous thing. But Clément Mignon has had interest from pro tour teams to go and race in professional cycling. Yeah. So he's no slouch. And Sam dropped him like a bad habit.
Cam Worth.
And then you've got
Australian guy, wasn't it? Ben came 13th, I think. Also former pro cyclist. Like there was a lot of.
You got Magnus Ditlev, who can put out a huge amount of power getting dropped. It was a team of very, very strong cyclists working together to try and chase down the solo leader.
Yeah. And he put time into them.
If he's going to put that much power out and with what looked like a smile on his face rather than a grimace.
He did smile when he went past me and got on. He was literally smiling when he rode past me up the. I told you that before. I was standing on that climb in Gordon, and as he came past with Clément Mignon, he had this huge smile on his face, and like literally looked me in the eyes and smiled at me. And every other person who came past was in the hurt locker, and I mean all the French guys, because there was plenty of French supporters where I was. They were all like really grimacing. Just fucking incredible, man. And again, the other thing that is worth noting, right, is this is his first Ironman win. This is the first time he has ever won an Ironman race. Like that's we've had to talk a lot about throwing out the rule book or the history book for a long time, but that's got to be like it's the significance of this. Like I just literally, I can't. He was so dominant. Like I can't see anybody. Like he's just on another. Yeah, I can't. I don't know what to say. If this is what the future of the next 10 years looks like, it's going to be pretty fucking boring, to be honest, because I genuinely don't think Christian or Gustav would have been able to compete with him on that day. It was just fucking, again, I didn't even consider him for the podium, to be honest. And again, that's my error.
I mean, it had, when I was watching him ride those climbs and ride Clément Mignon off his wheel, and he didn't seem to be breathing very hard. It had sort of 1996 stage 16 Utakam Bjorn Rees vibes to me. He just looked in control and like he could ride away from the field.
The other thing as well, I think about it, right, is that we're talking about a 24-year-old who has had this huge pressure put on him after Kona. He had the fastest bike time in Kona ever. Got run down the last minute, and I've said on the podcast, I feel like he made a bit of a rod for his own back, and that's why we've seen him have a series of poor performances. I'm starting to wonder now if all the stuff that's happened this year with Sam Laidlaw is a bit of like mind games or something, because
smoke and mirrors.
Because Lanzarote, he tried to outride Cam Worth, exploded on the run, said he had heat stroke. Challenge Roth tries to rides with Magnus Ditlev, says he tears his calf. 3 weeks later, does that race in London. I still don't believe you can do that with a torn calf. Pre-Singapore sick, post-Singapore sick, COVID 2 weeks before the race. Boom. Is it actually just mind games? Like, has he just been gaslighting us the whole year? Being like, oh, I'm really not going very well. Oh, I'm not to actually just lay this performance down? Because that's the other thing, right? Fucking phenomenal performance. But in the context of the year he's had, if all of those things are legit, if he did have all of those problems, and I'm not trying to say that he didn't, You have heat stroke. You're not training for a week. You tear your calf. You're not training. You're swimming, but you're not biking or
I mean, I'm
running.
assuming there are degrees of torn calf, but even at the lowest degree, if you're calling something a tear,
Tear,
if
not
it if
strain.
it if it classifies as a tear, then yeah, I mean that takes some recovery.
Yeah, and then COVID, and like how much training must you have missed? So you've not had this. You've not had this perfect build. Is it mind games? And again, to be honest, I actually thought Magnus pulling out of Singapore, which we sort of said that he probably should. And I was also like, is this mind games? Is this where we're at? And I hope I love the thought of it a little bit. I know I'm saying, oh, we want to see the best race each other, but I do like this idea that maybe there is a bit of mental.
I mean, it does look like it was a sensible option. Those that raced Singapore didn't have the best day.
Correct at all, except for Sam. But
except for Sam.
Just I've never seen anything like it before, mate. Like I literally was just there going, I'm just scratching my head. I'm really just scratching my head because we've got this super young guy wins his first ever Ironman race at the Ironman World Championships so dominantly, like genuinely. I expect we're going to see if this, one thing I really respect about Sam Laidlaw, and I think is probably why he's has so many big fans, is he races for the win. Like he doesn't race he goes all in, and it either works as it did on Sunday, or it blows up spectacularly like we've seen several times this year. So I like that about him. Like I like that we don't have a conservative guy. He's all in. I think that's phenomenal. But fuck me, if he starts to get that right more and more often, as you probably expect him to with age and maturity and experience and that accrued fitness and improvement, I can't
One
see
thing I
anybody
do
beating
like
him.
about him,
Yeah,
is it must piss the French off somewhat that he's French and he sounds like he's from South London.
I was somebody did ask that on the press conference, and somebody's born in the UK, moved to France when he was 3, but he's gone through the whole, went to school in France, did the
I
French
mean,
Federation.
I presume he's got an incredible French accent when he's speaking French.
I heard him speak French. Sounded French to me.
He probably sounds more French than some French people, but it's just quite amusing. But representing France, all right, Giza, how's it going? Yeah, the race is all right.
It is fascinating to see this resurgence we're seeing French triathlon at the moment, where you've got Leo Berger is the current WTCS world champion, and I'd say one of the favorites for the medal in Paris next year. We've got Cassandra Bergeron so dominant, Leonie Perrier, Perrier so dominant, Vincent Louis. I just don't see Vince, but Dorian Connix. But then even in long course now, we've got Leon Chevalier, Dennis Chevreau, Clement Mignon, Sam Laidlaw, Arnold Arthur. I can't. There's so many French. So we now have a short course world champion, Ironman world champion. It's a great time to be a French triathlon fan, mate.
So, putting France aside.
Yep.
What about Jan Frodeno?
Wasn't it upsetting?
Wasn't it? It's a shame. It's a shame because after his performance in Milwaukee, my brain had decided he was going to win this race.
To me, there's no doubt. No doubt.
I saw that. I saw him just riding into form. I thought he was going to ride that wave of form into this. But from a fairly early point after he'd come out of that swim on the bike, you saw him fading. And there was a little bit there where I was like, okay, he's just managing his effort at this point. But by the time he'd fallen back into that group with Patrick, I kind of knew it was over.
Yeah.
Because as soon as he's riding side by side with Patrick, who can put out a 2:32 marathon, then, it's game over. And that's where that's where his effort started to fade. And once he'd come into T2, it was clear he was just having a final. Yeah.
So I don't know if you'd heard this, but on the ground in Nice, there were rumors going around the race week that Jan was injured and Jan wasn't coming.
Yeah, I messaged you that, didn't I? And you responded with what?
Yeah, I'd heard it. I was maybe trying to play dumb a little bit, but like all reports, I was talking to Belinda Granger, who was talking with Emma, that he's in the shape of his life. I genuinely, I would have bet him if I had $1 million. I probably would have put $1 million on Jan Frodeno winning this race. I was so sure after that Milwaukee performance that it was his. I just thought, and you're right. I think not knowing what was happening because I was out on the bike, when I was on course and saw how far behind he was, I'm like, what the fuck is happening? And I think we have to. It's that Sam Laidlaw effect, right? Like the race got ripped apart, got ripped to pieces because of the pace off the front, and then everybody's gone shit. We need to,
Yeah, yeah. There
and
was no
that's
managing effort. There was no managing effort at all. Everybody was at the front. Jan Frodeno's key to this race was managing those climbs
mm,
and being part of a group of people that were also managing those climbs and keeping whoever wasn't just in check, if you know what I mean. That was, and then he could have then descended off the 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 bit down into the run, and if he was with the right people, and let's say someone like Patrick had disappeared off the back on the bike, he could have run to the win.
yeah,
As soon as someone like Sam is putting that much pressure at the front,
yep.
those big bikers are also putting a lot of pressure in to keep try and limit their losses. That's when the race gets torn apart. And an athlete like Jan Frodeno isn't going to stick with a race that's being torn apart like that on a bike course like that.
I think we've also just seen that for most of the later part of his career, or probably since he started, having the dominance that he had, Jan often dictated terms. Like it wasn't Jan having to be on the back foot as much. But I mean, it was phenomenal to see him on course. He was like loving it out there. He was waving to the crowd. He was high fiving people. Like he just looked like he was having the best time. And like genuinely, I've been quite open about the fact that I'm a huge Jan Frodeno fanboy. Like I'm quite upset to see him retire. Like I think the sport is worse without Jan Frodeno in it. Like I think the reason that I follow the sport as passionately as I do is because of Jan Frodeno, man. Like he made me enjoy being a fan of the sport so much because of the way that he raced, the personality that he brought to it. And like genuinely, I'm really upset to see him retire because he's such a positive force for the sport. And I really wish that we saw that fairy tale. I understand that's how it works. However, do you really think he's retiring, or do you think after this we're going to see him in Kona next year? Because I think we might see him in Kona next year.
No,
Ah,
no. If you'd asked me 6 months ago, I thought that he might do another Kona, but I've seen too much of him making not a meal out of it, but announcing his retirement through his sponsors, through social media. You know, I don't think he's going to do another year. I would like to be wrong. This is one of those instances where I would happily be wrong because I'd love to see him do a Kona,
so
but
I'm probably the opposite of you. Whereas if you had have asked me 6 months ago, I would have said no way. And I think if you had have asked me in the lead up to this race, 2 days before, I would have said no way. But I don't think I don't think he wants to go out that way. Again, I don't know. I've not spoken a word to him about it.
so, I mean, do you think that if he let's say he did one more year and went to Kona, do you think going out with a podium at Kona or a top five would be enough? Or do you think it would be win or nothing?
I think it'd be win or nothing.
Mm-hmm.
I think it'd be win or nothing. And I don't know. I think what this has shown, right, is because one of the things that I think is interesting, again, talking with Joe and a bunch of other guys on the ground, is we always focus on Kona for one thing: the heat, the heat, the heat, the heat, the heat. There used to be the wind. The race is early now, so it's not as windy, but it's the heat as this limiting factor. Or you see people tend to focus, I suppose, on the negatives of the course. I think that now we have had St. George and we've had Nice, and it's actually showing the strengths of the course for some athletes too. Like a Joe Skipper, right? Let's use Joe as the example. I actually think one of the things that suits Joe about the Kona course is the fact that it is hold the error position for almost 180 kilometers. Like Joe's very good at doing that. So I think that there's athletes now, and again, Jan Frodeno, probably a much more measured race because you don't have these climbs where you're not going to see these huge gaps. You're able to pace yourself or not see those spikes or those big, requirements of a huge climb. I think that's something that I've started to be aware of with Kona, is that there are actually the things that it suits athletes rather than just the heat. So yeah, I don't know. Look, you make actually you saying it makes me think maybe you're right. Maybe he will just. It's probably just wishful. As I've just sort of said, I just kind of don't want to admit that he's done, mate. To be honest, because
No, I
I've
think he's
been.
made peace with it, mate. If I'm honest,
Mm.
that's the way I saw that race at the weekend with all the goodbyes and the. I mean, there's a chance. There's a chance. I know. Talking about retirements and possible comebacks, I know Mark Cavendish was there as well.
He was, and I saw
Um,
Chris Froome too.
what?
Actually,
Yeah. So I'm fingers crossed. Mark Cavendish hasn't quite retired and does one more year. He is hoping that some of our favorite athletes do one more year, right?
yeah, but like I just think, yeah, Jan Frodeno, absolute, just what he's done for the sport of triathlon, I think is unbelievable. And we've seen this generation has come through as a direct reaction to what he did. So wishful thinking, mate. But yeah, that was that. What else, mate? What else can we
Let's
talk
talk
about?
about predictions. How many people from your predictions did you get on the podium? I had one, Magnus Ditlev, but I had him. No, I did. I actually had him in third. Yeah, so I got Magnus right.
To be
Other than
honest,
that, I was way off.
I don't really think I had. I don't think, which is weird, right? I don't think I'd actually really sat down and thought about it. I
Because you
had,
weren't on the podcast.
yeah, probably, but I definitely thought Joe was going to podium. I thought Jan was going to win, and I don't. If I mean, hindsight is a wonderful thing. If I had to pick a third place on the podium, I probably would have gone with. I mean, the names that were bumbling around was Leon Chevalier, Braden Curry. I didn't have Sam. I probably didn't have Magnus. I thought Magnus would just struggle a bit on the descents, which it sort of seemed like he did a little bit. That fucking drop posting was ridiculous. What an ugly addition to a beautiful bike. I thought when I saw it, I was like, oh, ugh,
Yeah,
it's no good.
yeah.
Who else would I put up there? I mean, yeah, look, to me, I obviously didn't get any right. I don't think I would have picked. Look, Magnus probably Patrick Lang. I heard a lot of people talking about Patrick Lang as a. I mean, I saw what Dave Tilbury Davis. You sent me your picks, and I didn't. I also was like, I just don't think so, and I was very quickly like, oh, I'm wrong about this one too. So I don't think I would have even come close to having a personal
Yeah,
record.
but I mean, Dave's reason for picking Lang was off slightly. I think he'll be listening, and Dave, have at it. But he was saying that Patrick's been doing a lot of training with pro cyclists. He'll be able to go up those climbs. He'll be able to hang. Lang ran himself into second on the strength of that marathon.
Yeah.
It wasn't on the strength of that bike.
You're right. What was the gap? When he got off the bike, how far behind Sam was he?
Very, very,
Really?
very behind.
Okay.
But I think it was about 12 minutes, wasn't it?
I honestly can't remember. But okay, so
No,
he's fucking. Well, he ran what 2:30. He ran a 2:32,
2:32.
and Sam ran a
And
2:41.
so he ran.
That's mind blowing, isn't it?
Yeah. So,
It's
I
actually
mean,
mind blowing.
it was, if he'd had I think if he'd had a bit more bike to him,
Hmm.
he would have been close enough for that win, but he didn't. The problem was Sam Laidlaw had too much bike to him, and
I
he
just
ripped the
can't.
field apart.
I just
He
can't get over that
decimated
fucking
what
bike,
is a
mate.
field that it soon became what looked like a very uncontrolled race.
You know,
It didn't look like people were biking together, or it looked like the field was strung out and everybody was racing. It was like watching crosswinds.
uh, when I was obviously helped. I keep saying obviously, like I helped with Joe and Tom do their live podcast in Nice. So I set up the tech and stuff, and one of the questions they were talking about was, do you see this race? Will there be big groups come off the bike, or we're going to see ones and twos? And I definitely thought we were going to see those ones and twos, and that seems to be what we saw. But
Have
I
you
just,
been moonlighting with another podcast?
yeah, mate, I do that. I'm actually on several. No, I was just setting up the tech, mate. I was just like the roadie, carrying the equipment and all of that sort of stuff. But fuck, man, I just can't get over that bike spin. And one of the things I heard was that Sam's time on that course was faster than Crowe's Kona course record. Like, just let that marinate for a little while. Like, it's fucking unbelievable how much the sport has improved in the last decade.
Yeah, I mean, look, Nice has got some hefty climbs, but it's also got 30 kilometers of descending.
But it's not fast descending, mate. It's technical. It's windy. It's you're not.
Tell Cam Worth it's not fast
Yeah,
descending.
fuck, it's true, mate. Honestly, Camworth. Actually, I do want to.
Made me wince though. Hang on, before we move away from descending, when the camera cut to Sam on that first descent, and he went round a very
Oh, I saw that.
sweeping right hand
Yeah.
with his right pedal down. I was just like, ugh.
I did see a little clip about where he nearly ran into the barricade. Uh,
He didn't look smooth, man. He looked like a powerful rider, but he doesn't look like a man that can descend particularly well.
where I
Whereas he
was,
did.
where I was on the descent, you could really tell. It was very obvious who knew how to handle the bike and who didn't. Like there was a huge difference, right? So, I think the clunkiest one that I saw come down the bike was Peter Heinrich. Peter Heinrich looked like he didn't know how to ride a bike at all. It was very, very clunky. But I just think if you look at this race, there were so many people in probably the top 20 that I wouldn't have picked ever. like just
Mm.
ever. I mean, Mike Phillips' brother Ben beat Jan Frodeno. I was talking with Ben saying like, you're going to dine on that one forever. You beat Jan Frodeno in his last ever world championship. But it was carnage, right? And I think we all sort of were hoping to see this carnage. I just don't think it's the carnage that a lot of us expected because, Bradley Weiss got that penalty for drafting. Was it drafting? And that was sort of his, there was footage of him in tears at the penalty box.
Yeah, he had a bit of a meltdown at the penalty box. I saw that. Um,
Yeah,
do you know anything deeper about that? Do you know anything what drove that decision, or was it just straight up?
literally didn't even like. I only heard it because somebody put in the chat. I have not watched this. One of the things I'm going to do when I'm home, and I've got some bike trainer sessions, I'm going to go watch the whole race because I love to do that. But yeah, that was Nice. I mean, we've spoken a lot about the pro race. The next thing that I want to talk about is the movement of the course, because the fucking narrative in the lead up to this is whole like it's only the World Championships if it's in Kona, and we've again been quite vocal saying that we think it's a good thing that the race is moving. Do you think that people have now watched this race and do you think it's changed their opinions, or do you think people are still adamant that the only place for a World Championship is Kona?
I think if you're in that camp where you're adamant, then your opinion is not going to change until the World Championship has moved a few times
Mhm.
to various places. Right now, those people can still say to themselves, well, this will just be a one off. They'll be back to Kona next year. And we'll always have this one off that didn't really matter and didn't really count. I think once it's solidified itself as something, whether it stays in Nice every other year for the men and the women rotating, or whether it moves to different places, once it solidifies itself as that, then it will become in their minds the world championship that was won that year. I think right now those people are still saying, oh yeah, it's just a one off. This one doesn't count. This one's not real. Now, for me, it does because I love it. I love the fact that it moved and I want it to move more. I just think some people will need that solidification of the movement before it becomes the actual world championship result.
I discussed this on the ground a lot. Almost every meeting that I had, every person I spoke to, the conversation inevitably moved to the moving of the race. And the overwhelming opinion of people on the ground was, we love that the race is here. We hate that they've split the men's and women's.
Oh yeah, well we've said that
Yeah.
already.
And I think that looking at the reactions that I've seen online, I think that a lot of people will change their opinions of Nice. There's a lot of discussion about the roll downs and, lower tier athletes going and stuff like that. I feel like I cannot, this is a beautiful place to race. For me, being there, I would rather go to Nice every day of the week rather than go back to Kona. I did not enjoy Kona last year. Nice it's a legitimate city. And the thing that I really appreciated was in Kona, there's like 4 restaurants or cafes that everybody goes to that you can't escape the race. Nice had this incredible thing where you could either, because like Old Town in Nice kind of became like that's where all the athletes were. So if you wanted that Kona surround yourself by it experience, you could. But if then you got a bit sick of it like I did and you wanted to escape it, you could just go 2 or 3 blocks over and suddenly there's no triathletes in sight.
And you're in
And
a restaurant somewhere.
mate, I ate at a different restaurant every single meal in Nice. Whereas in Kona, I'm going to fucking Lava Java or Huggos 27,000 fucking times because it's the only places really to eat. It was fantastic venue for this race. Like I loved it as a location. As I said, I just didn't love the cycling as like not as a
No, and,
race.
and accessibility as well. You're going to get more people going to a race in Nice. You're going to get more brands going to a race in Nice. You're going to get more people, more brands flying more people out to a race like Nice.
That is something that I wanted to address, but we'll probably talk about this more in a bonus episode where we're going to record in less than a minute. The expo was shithouse. There was almost no
Was it?
activations. The expo was shithouse. Day one, you get there like excited to see who's here, who you can. There was nobody there. There was no activations. There was Canyon took over a bar, but that was it. There was no like in Kona, Hoka take over the restaurants. Like there was none of it. So I think talking with some brands, they were very much testing the waters. They wanted to see what it was like first before they commit the big activation spend. But that was the one thing that I found very disappointing was the lack of support from the brands, because we said that we expect the smaller brands who can't afford to go to Kona to get behind this one. They didn't. But I hope that changes.
I assume you spent most of your time in the Ironman Expo, didn't you, buying all the gear?
mate. Can't you see? I'm
Covered in
actually.
hats and
I
t-shirts.
tell you
And...
what, just because we're about to wrap up, but one thing I didn't appreciate, or I made this comment a lot, is like, you're in the south of France in Nice, beautiful part of the world, beautiful people everywhere, beautifully dressed, and you can just spot these fucking triathletes coming from a mile away, backpack, finisher shirt, neuro-colored fucking calf socks, visor, hokers. And it's like, God, we're
We
just not the
suck.
coolest people on the
Yeah.
planet. Are we?
We suck.
But
I other than race day, I won't wear race clothes. I'm not a finisher t-shirt wearer. Never have been.
I did give Joe a bit of a hard time, to be honest, because as we went through the finish line, they go through they're obviously ready for all the age groupers, and they go to Joe, oh, what size finisher shirt? And I'm like, no, he doesn't want it. Joe's like, yes, I do. This is the hardest one I've ever earned. So Joe took his Ironman World Championships finisher shirt. So there you go. But Jimbo, let's save the rest of our chats for our bonus episode we're about to record, where we're going to get into the nitty gritty, the gossip. I'm going to give some opinions that I haven't said on this one because I don't want it to be publicly available. But if people want to find out what we're saying and they want to find out more about the podcast, tell them where they need to go.
If you want to find out more about the podcast, then you need to join up on our Patreon, which is www.patreon.com/talkingtriathlon.com. If you want to follow Tim, he's
Not it at all, actually.
Is it not?
Patreon.com/talking triathlon.
There you go. I just haven't got the thing in front of me. I'm winging it. I'm finally trying to do what I should be able to do every week.
You should.
If you want to follow Tim, is at tford14 on Instagram, and I'm at bale.james85 on Instagram. You can also join us in various other places. If you join the Patreon, you get into the groups that we've got. We've got a WhatsApp chat, we've got a Facebook chat, we got all of that. And you get to help steer the content of the episode. We put a message out yesterday on the WhatsApp group saying, what should we talk about in the bonus episode? And we have some input from those people that are in there.
Exactly. You can also follow us on Instagram at Talking Triathlon, on Twitter at Talk Triathlon. We've got a YouTube channel. We're getting towards 1,000 subscribers. So please jump over to us. Even if you don't want to watch it on YouTube, please jump over and subscribe. Give us a thumbs up. We like it. And again, as I said, I've started to say, comments, thoughts about what we're discussing, go to YouTube. It's the place that I check now. So it's a great way if you want to give your opinions about the things we're discussing. That's the place. And again, huge shout out to everybody that came up and said hello to me and Nice. It's always like, oh, hi, I listen to the podcast. I think my default now is to be like, oh, I'm sorry about that. Somebody came up to me and he's like, I love the podcast. You swear too much. And I said, fuck off. But nice. Jimbo, thanks, mate. Look, guys, as I said, we're about to record our bonus show. We'll be back next week. I don't even know what we're doing. It's a bit of a whirlwind. But until then, Jimbo, talk to you later.
Cheerio.